Welcome to another session of Worship Leader Q&A with Jake and Spencer. My name is Jake Goslin. I'm the creator of churchfront.com, helping you lead gospel-centered and tech-savvy worship. And I am joined today with my friend Spencer Cormany, the founder of Leading Worship Well. He has a great Instagram account at Leading Worship Well. You can follow him there, or you can go to his website, leadingworshipwell.com, where he's got a great blog going there and some free goodies there for you as well. So here is the agenda of today's Q&A session. Here we are streaming live on YouTube. So if you are logging on the stream, let us know where you guys are from. We always like hearing from you and meeting you. But then also ask your questions that have to do with worship ministry. They can be worship leading related or maybe tech related. And then we're also going to be pulling questions that you guys emailed into us. So we're just going to be working our way down the list. We'll probably do a couple email questions, and then we'll take a couple questions from the comments. So with that said, I believe that's all the housekeeping is done. So let's go ahead and move right into the first question. And we're going to be hanging out here for probably about, I'd say, the next 45 minutes or so. So Spencer, go ahead and take it away with the first question.
All right, the first question comes from PJ, and we've got like 5 questions from him, and they're all really good questions, so we're going to answer them all. The first question from PJ is, how often do you introduce new songs, and how do you go about teaching the congregation that new song?
We try to introduce no more than one or maybe 2 new songs a month. It really depends on your church culture. Is your church receptive to learning new songs? I think some churches are, but you don't want to overdo introducing new songs. So our rule of thumb at our church, and that works great for us, is like let's aim for one new song a month, and then when we want to introduce it, we will play it on week 1, and then we will play it on week 2, maybe give it a week off on week 3, and then play it again on week 4. So that's a great rhythm. I think I learned that from something Paul Beloche wrote a long time ago. We have to remember that until we're pretty much sick of hearing these new songs, that's when the congregation is finally catching on to it. Of course, there's ways you can share that song on social media beforehand, send that song out like via email, like a link to the song on YouTube or Spotify, and let your congregation know, hey, we're going to be singing this new song soon. Maybe explain what the song's about, why you want to sing it. Maybe it goes along with a sermon series that you guys are going through. So I think there's other ways you can help foster the familiarity with the song. Maybe do a Facebook Live session where it's just you on your church's Facebook account as a worship leader with a phone and you an acoustic guitar or piano, whatever you play, and be like, hey guys, here's a new song we're doing. Like, I think people in your church would actually be really interested in that. So I would, my key points though, my thing is like always make sure you repeat it those first couple weeks. Anything to add to that, Spencer?
I think that's good. I really like the idea about doing a Facebook Live about it. I actually did that one time for a new song that we were doing, and it was very beneficial because you actually have time to explain a song in a way that you might not have. Like, you could take 3 minutes to explain a song while you're doing it, how it relates to what you're doing at your church. You don't really have that much time during a service, so if you can do it on a Facebook Live and then play through the song, I think that's a great idea. The other thing I thought of is that you can introduce a song in the walk-in music. So when people are walking in, sometimes I'll throw it in that playlist, and that'll just kind of get them familiar with it. Or we have a countdown that starts our service, and sometimes I'll put the new song in that countdown for a couple weeks before our band actually introduces it. Yeah, and how often do I introduce a new song? I'd say no more than once a month, but as we talked about before, I think we talked about it last week, I like to have a reason for introducing a song more than just, hey, it's time to introduce a new song because it's a new month. I like to pair it with a message series or just something that's going on in our church that needs a song behind it.
Yep. The next question PJ asked was, how do you go about preparing spiritually for each service?
I love that question because as worship leaders, we're so focused on preparing musically, and we learn all the songs and focus on the transitions. The biggest thing spiritually for me is to not just run through the songs to learn them musically, but actually run through the songs to worship with them before. Like actually sit down with your guitar and treat it like I'm not just preparing for Sunday morning, but I'm using these songs to worship God. And in those moments, you get a bunch of ideas and you start to see connections between songs, how they all work together. And from that, you get speaking transitions and things that you want to say in the middle of songs and stuff like that. But if you just treat it like I'm just worshiping God, that's how I prepare spiritually.
Yeah. Lately, I've really come to appreciate just being intentional about, I would say, your holistic health in general. So being, we are definitely spiritual beings. That's a piece of who we are and how God has made us. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that that's integrated in with the rest of your life. So I think as worship leaders, alongside of just, making space to reflect, kind of like what you've been talking about, on the songs that we're choosing, the songs we're singing, and make space for a relationship with God, we also have to just make space to actually make wise decisions concerning other parts of our lifestyle. Like, let's get enough sleep, let's get exercise, let's eat well, and that's really going to complement, like, when you're there on Sunday. I think it really is all interrelated with the spiritual aspect as well, because God cares about us as holistic beings. So the next question, moving on, PJ, what he asked is, what's the optimal number of vocalists to have in the mix for modern worship sound? Kind of our rule of thumb, it really depends, but I think modern worship, there tends to be fewer vocalists. Like, you don't have this 6-member vocal team, but I think you can have that many. I don't think it really matters. It just matters how are you arranging it and what different parts are being sung. A lot of new songs don't necessarily require a 3 or 4 part harmony, but sometimes it sounds tasteful. I think this past week at our church, we had 4 vocalists on our platform for the first time since our church plant has been in existence, and we didn't have 4 harmonies going. Usually we have 2 folks who are just taking point, leading the song, a male and a female. One takes lead, one has the main female harmony, or vice versa. And then the other 2 are just kind of in a supportive role. They'll double melodies or sing in unison, or something like that, where they're not really trying to bring too much more variety to the sound. That's my opinion. Do you have any other thoughts on modern worship and what that sounds like, Spencer? And Spencer is frozen, so I'm actually going to hang up on the call here real quick and bring him back in. Skype does not like Spencer very much. Here we go. Let's bring you back in, Spencer. All right, Spencer's back. Spencer, do you have any other thoughts on vocal arrangements for modern worship music?
Yes, I was thinking not just musically, but also from the perspective of what's going on in the room, because I think part of it depends on what your room looks like and how big your stage is. For example, I lead in sort of a smaller church, so I wouldn't have 6 people on stage because they couldn't fit on there. But if you've got this huge stage, and it becomes about leading the people in front of you, so not that you can't lead worship with just one vocalist if you've got a huge stage, but I think it's more effective if you've got people spread out over the stage and they're engaging with the people right in front of them. So that's part of it. The other thing you could do if you have a bunch of worship vocalists is create sort of a choir. I've seen that a lot now in bigger churches. If you've got 10 vocalists, maybe put that group in a choir and have them behind the band, and their job is to provide support and just sing the melody along with you, but then also to model worship for your church. I think that's another good use of them.
Yep. Let's head on over to the YouTube comments. I want to give a shout out to Taylor Tubbs in the comments here. He's a student of Worship Leaders School. What's up, Taylor? And he asks, how do you get such a glorious beard ready for worship? I don't know if you're talking about my beard, because I don't feel like it's that glorious.
He's not talking about your beard.
I think I think he's talking about Spencer's beard. So, Spencer, any grooming tips?
Yes. grow it as long as you possibly can before it drives you crazy. I always grow mine out to like here, and then I start to eat it whenever I'm eating my food, so I have to trim it. So that's tip number one. Grow it as long as you can manage to grow it without going insane. Number two is to use shampoo on it. Just shampoo. I don't put beard oil in it. I don't do anything crazy. Just shampoo.
Reed asks recommendations for buying an affordable MacBook. One recommendation I give a lot of people is go to the website bnhphoto.com, and there you can buy like previous year model MacBooks, MacBook Pros, and you could save money because it's still brand new out of the box, but it's just extra inventory they had from previous years. So usually it's a few $100s cheaper to go that route. Of course, you can check out eBay, Amazon for used MacBooks as well, but you want to be aware that sometimes the less you pay for a MacBook, you might run into performance issues.
All right, Nathaniel asks, how much attention do you place on choosing songs that are theologically accurate? You want to talk about your process for that, Jake?
Yeah, I think the first step is to make sure that we as worship leaders just understand sound theology, and we have a good concept of what is Scripture saying, and what are all the kind of responsible interpretations people have come up with over the past couple millennia that we've been a church, and how have we kind of articulated that into systematic theology and into biblical theology. And then as worship leaders, hopefully we are informed that way, so when we're like just looking through a song, we can kind of unpack quickly, okay, what themes are we hitting on right now? Is this a song of adoration? Is it a song about God being creator? Is it a song more of like confession and sinfulness, like man's state of depravity and sinfulness? Is this a song about new creation? Like, usually I can look at a song, look at the lyrics, and just kind of get a gist of what's the main theme of this song, what biblical theological theme is it touching on, and then I'll look at maybe certain lines might be questionable, and I think that's where we face more, what could you say, a little bit more difficult these days when it comes to some newer songs. I, for the most part, have quite a bit of trust in the teams at Hillsong, because I know their songwriting process goes through pretty rigorous pastoral theological vetting before it gets published. Same thing with Bethel and Elevation. And granted, each of those churches have their own traditions and theological backgrounds that you have to consider, and maybe you're completely not on the same base as them. I feel like I'm pretty much on the similar base of most of them, maybe some minor differences here or there. So all that to say, I usually trust their process about picking lyrics and making sure nothing's like misleading or not truthful, so that when I'm looking at these songs, when we introduce them, there's really like not that much that I'm like, oh, I can't do this song. But I know there's some songs. I was recently talking to a worship leader the other day, where their leadership at her church didn't like the use of the phrase "God is madly in love with you" in the new song by Hillsong United. I think it's called "Good Grace," and she's kind of, she has to like defend those lyrics, why she thinks it's okay to do it. I'm not sure whether or not they're going to want to do it. In that case, like, I don't think there's any biblical or theological reason not to use that phrase. I think God is madly in love with us when you think about all of the truths in Scripture and what He did, sending His Son to die on a cross. So that's kind of what goes in my mind. But I know in some contexts people are like super nitpicky. I think they make mountains out of molehills sometimes, and I don't know, they might be offended when they hear me say that, but I think honestly that's kind of the truth of what it is. So I have lots of thoughts on this topic. Spencer, anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a theology nerd, so I'm always breaking down every single line of a song and just like comparing it to my theology and what I believe about God. And I think there's almost like a paradox where we always hear people talking about how we want really deep theological songs, but if a song goes too deep theologically, then we're not so sure about it. Do you know what I mean, Jake? Like,
yeah.
If they use language that's too specific, we're like, I don't know about that. So
yeah.
can you explain it to your church? I think is a good question. Can you explain the lyrics of the song to your church in a way that makes sense and is something that your church believes? I think that's a good framing question for picking songs.
Yeah, I love what you said, that paradox right there, and I never heard it articulated that way, because generally that's the type of culture where a lot of the nitpicking comes from. And I always, especially recently, just to call out some of the songs, like "Reckless Love" gets a lot of pushback from in a lot of church contexts because of the phrase "reckless love," and I understand where critiques come from, and I understand that the concern about, is God's really reckless in His love for us, and I get it. I get those critiques, but at the same time, when you even look at the biblical narrative, usually, like, the people who God are not a big fan of are the ones who nitpick, or the ones who feel super uncomfortable about how extraordinary God actually is in His love for people and in His love for the prodigal son, or so that's why I just want people to pause more, and I think it's our job as worship leaders to help them see these theological truths. And I think sometimes, because if something makes you feel uncomfortable, it's probably because it actually is true. That's kind of the other the thing I think about sometimes when we come across these things. So, anyways, that's enough. We can kind of close the book on that topic.
Here's a question from Jay. He said, "How often do you meet with the front of house engineer as to what you want in the mix, or do you let the engineer just mix the service? Do you have a good relationship with the sound guy?"
I'm looking at that question right now, thinking about our situation. So it really depends, I think, on who your sound engineer is. If it's a volunteer who knows how the soundboard works, but maybe they just need more assistance in really finding that, getting that fine-tuned mix. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just leave the stage, and when everybody else is singing and playing, I'll come back and just help make sure things are dialed in. More specifically, because I feel like I've been in the music production world long enough where I can kind of know, okay, how can we dial in the drum set just to sound cleaner? So then for our sound engineer, it's a matter of just adjusting the level on the fader. So I like to help with things like EQ, compression, noise gates, the processing that's a little bit more involved, but then also trust the sound engineer to kind of balance those out, especially when I'm on stage. I have to, because I can't do much. But then there's been some cases where you just know the sound engineer, they know what they're doing. They're more experienced, and they're able to translate what you're thinking as a worship leader musically into how that's supposed to sound through the sound system.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. I think, well, first of all, one of the sound guys at our church is my dad, so I have a good relationship with him. The other two, I trust. They know what they're doing, so I don't feel the need to tell them what they need to do, because in many cases they know better than me what needs to happen in the room, and they're the ones out there listening to it. I'm on stage. I can't really hear what's going on in the house. Occasionally I'll step away like you do, Jake, and just listen, or what I'll do is I'll record just from the board and play it back through the main sound system at my church and listen to it that way, and get a sense of what they're doing. And if there's something wrong, I'll make a note of it and bring it up to them and just say, "Hey, I noticed that the vocals were really low last Sunday. What do you think about bringing them up a little bit this Sunday?" Just, I don't like to be too confrontational, because I haven't found that to be necessary yet with my sound guys. I like what they're doing, and they do a good job. So yeah, I have a good relationship with them.
Yeah. DJ asked in the comments, a tech question: have you heard Dante's new announcement about doing video over IP alongside their normal audio over IP? Dante is this cool networking software and hardware that you can just send lots of audio channels over Cat5 that can come in handy when you're just wanting to make multi-track recordings and basically send a bunch of channels of audio from one place to another. Now he's saying they're going to do this video-wise. That could be cool for someone in my context where we need to run, every week we have to set up our projectors and stuff. It would be cool to be able to send that over reliably over IP, I guess what they call it. I sound like I know what I'm talking about. I kind of do, but that sounds really cool, DJ. Let's see. There was another question. Packy Kennels asked, please tell us about compression during live session on acoustic guitars. Have you thought much about that, Spencer?
I mean, I have a little compression on my acoustic guitars. The instrumentation in my band, though, is basically just acoustic guitar, so I don't want to compress the heck out of it or else we won't get any dynamics. So I have a very small amount of compression. If you're in a bigger band where the acoustic guitar is more of just a texture piece, then I would probably compress it a little bit more so you can actually hear it in a full band context. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I couldn't give you the exact parameters as far as like threshold and ratio and all that, like attack and release. Like I'm not that much of an expert on compression. For the most part, though, if you're watching this and you're like, what's compression? It's signal processing that makes it so there's less of a dynamic range between the quieter parts of your strumming or your noodling and the louder. And if you saw the audio waves, you'd see your audio waves maybe this tall, if you recorded it, and they'd maybe come down, and it would just sound more equal and consistent. And with acoustic guitar, it's nice because you just want it to be kind of percussive, have a consistent volume level as you're playing with the rest of the band. So it just kind of makes things sound smoother. But yeah, I'm sorry I can't give any specific tips on the parameters of those things. I'd have to consult with someone a lot more smarter than me. I just go on my Behringer or my Midas M32. I just go put some compression on it and just make sure it's maybe gain reductions like a couple decibels or something like that. Nothing major. What's the next question?
Let's jump back to PJ's questions from the email real quick.
Yeah.
He asks, is it beneficial for musicians to memorize music and play without charts? What do you do on your team, Jake?
Yes, it is very beneficial. If we can get away from charts, it allows us to be more present to the rest of the band, to the congregation, and if you're memorizing the song, you're going to know it better. It just forces you to have to know all the progressions, all the lyrics. I'll admit I cheat with lyrics quite often with our confidence monitor in the back of the room. But when I don't have confidence monitors, I hate having a music stand with lyrics and charts on there. It looks weird. It looks dumb. I just don't like having that on stage. And it's very tempting to keep my eyes down as a worship leader. So I'd rather keep my eyes up. Sometimes I'm looking at the confidence monitor, but then I can also just look across the room, smile at people, engage. It just feels like such a way more communal, better experience that way. And most worship songs are not that complicated. I think it's harder to memorize lyrics than it is chord progressions. Then again, it's not the end of the world to use chords.
Yeah, I think, like you said, worship songs aren't that difficult, and I always find it funny that musicians can memorize the lyrics to songs on the radio so easily, but then when it comes to a worship song that supposedly just repeats itself over and over again, which we always complain about, they have problems with that. So once again, I think we can do a little bit better in memorizing, and it gets way easier the more you do it. It honestly does. So just some practical steps on how to memorize. I just start as small as possible. So maybe if you're a musician, you just take one, the verse, and I'm going to memorize the chords to this verse, and when it comes to the point in that song on Sunday, I'm just not going to look at my music, or I'm not even going to have it in front of me at that point. And then slowly over time you start adding, okay, now I'm going to do that, but with the chorus as well, and then eventually you have a whole song memorized, and you just keep adding songs like that over and over again, and it really does get easier. I'll share a story about this past Sunday because memorizing my music really came in handy. This past Sunday, my co-leader, he was supposed to lead 2 songs during the service, and I was going to lead the other 4. And Sunday morning, he called and he had the flu and he couldn't lead. And we don't even have a confidence monitor in the back of our church. So all of a sudden, I had to lead these 2 songs that I kind of knew, but I didn't really have all the words memorized. And just because I've been memorizing my music for 8 years and haven't played with my music for 8 years, I was able to refresh my memory on the lyrics and the chords and then do it on Sunday with no problem. So I'm not saying that to be like I'm the greatest memorizer of music ever.
You're so amazing.
I'm just saying it gets way easier the more you do it. It's a skill that you learn, and you start to come up with little techniques to start to memorize stuff.
Final question from PJ. How do you balance managing all the tech and responsibilities of the worship leader while still keeping the Lord in focus? My quick answer to that is do the prep work beforehand. Do it thoroughly during the week. Make sure you just have all your bases covered. All your musicians are prepared, ready to go. They have the charts they're going to need. They're actually practicing them at home. Make sure the tech stuff is prepped, and you double check things. It takes like maybe a minute or two to double check all the slides are right, all your Ableton cues are right, things will function properly. You do all that work ahead of time before you show up at church, and when you show up on Sunday, at least this is my case, the more intentional focus prep work I put in my office here, because we don't have a church building, we just meet at a high school, but the more I do better job here, when I arrive at church, things go smoothly, and I can focus on worship and the Lord and pastoring our congregation because all the technology is good to go. Like, we're in an age now where you can actually rely on these computers and pieces of software like 99% of the time, and things go fine, and I can just really engage my congregation and just be in the moment. And it's just been it's been such a huge game changer for my worship ministry over the past couple of years as I've gotten better at using Ableton and all these other pieces of tech that we're using. So that's my 2 cents on that. I don't think people should view this as a dichotomy of, oh, I'm going to be tech savvy or I'm going to be focused on God. Like, no, like you can do both of those things and hold both of those things together, and they're not in the opposition to one another. You just have to make the time and put in the work to make sure everything's prepped properly.
I think the other part of it too is viewing your responsibility as a worship leader as worship in and of itself. Like, whenever you're on stage, you're not necessarily in the same mindset as people who have just come and the people that you're leading, because you have other responsibilities. You're always thinking of what's going to come next. You know, what do I need to say after this song is over? And I think that those things can be just as much focused on God and an act of worship as the actual act of just singing. You know, I think we need to expand our horizons on what worship means, because sometimes worship is just glorifying God. Simple as that. It doesn't matter if you're singing, it doesn't matter if you're praying, whatever it is. And I think that leading people in worship is an act of worship. So I wouldn't beat yourself up about, like, I didn't get that worship experience that I was expecting because I was so focused on these other things. I think that's worship.
Yeah, great insight. Oh, back over to the YouTube comments. Cameron asked, how do you record from a Midas M32R to Logic Pro? I think it's a pretty simple setup. You just go over. I actually have my M32R right here, so I'm just going to kind of scoot over a little bit so you guys can see. I'm working on my church sound course right now, so this guy's been living in my office lately. But when you're looking at the M32R, just go over to routing and then go over to card out. And in the card out section, you can say, I want these channels to go to the sound card out. And the sound card is what translates the audio into a format so that your laptop can receive that sound into Logic. And then inside Logic, you go and you select the M32 as your device. So I can't remember what Logic calls it inside the software. It's like DN USB or something like that. And then once it knows that this is the input device, you can go through each channel in your session, and however many channels you're using. Let's say you have 16 channels for your band. Go make 16 channels, and then in each channel assign the input to the proper card output that you have here on the board. It probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense there. It is simple in concept, but you really just have to get familiar with the routing options. Look up YouTube videos or tutorials on M32 or X32 boards when it comes to digital routing.
Haley asks, as a part-time worship leader, how can I go about encouraging our full-time worship director in leading a more tech-savvy worship? So this is somebody who's I don't. I assume she's not on staff, or maybe she is, but only in a part-time capacity. How do you talk to somebody who has a little bit more authority in your church about leading a more tech-savvy worship, Jake?
I don't know if I have an amazing answer to that question. It's a whole concept of leading up and like being able to, because sometimes we're in situations where, yeah, you probably do have better ideas or a better vision than someone above you does. You have to ideally respect them, but at the same time, hopefully they are receptive to new ideas and strategies that are going to grow the ministry. If they're never open to those things, then that's tough, and I really don't think there's much hope in changing that. Maybe eventually you'll find a spot where you actually can be in charge of the ministry. But I think you just present to them the facts, the benefits, try to show them like, hey, we can do this in a way that's not going to cause you more work. I'll even learn how to do this, or we can train people how to do this. But it's a great question and a great thing to be thinking of.
Yeah, whenever you said leading up, it made me think of this book, which is How to Lead When You're Not in Charge by Clay Scroggin. So he's sort of the second in charge, I guess, at North Point under Andy Stanley. And it's a great book about what Jake was just talking about how to lead whenever you're not in charge. So be able to offer opinions in a way that isn't like threatening to the person in charge. So I think just maybe explaining what that tech is going to allow you to do that you can't currently do is a good place to start.
Let's go ahead to the next question, YouTube comments. Wow, so many comments here. I'm like losing track of where we are. Okay, here we are. Let's see. If you can help, what's the best way to play click files on my Android phone while while you sing at church? Unfortunately, there are really not a whole lot of options for Android. I think there's an app called Worship Band Song or something like that you could check out. I have not tried it myself. I think it's like an open source software. Other than that, you could also you could create multi-tracks. You can kind of mix down a multi-track session from a digital audio workstation like Logic or Pro Tools and put it so your click and guide cues are panned to the left, your backing tracks are panned to the right, and then you could just put that exported song into your mobile device, your Android device, in any music playlist, and then just press play, and you'll be able to have click and tracks on one side in one channel, and then or click and guide on one side, and then tracks on the other side. Unfortunately, right now the really the best options for running click and multi-tracks, it's going to be with an iOS device, with iPhone or iPad.
All right, let's answer this question. I find this interesting. This is from Nathaniel again. He says, what's your guys' thoughts on modern worship songs sometimes being quote-unquote too feminine? Do you know of any worship songs that are too feminine, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know where this is coming from. There's a lot of language that is, like Jesus is my boyfriend, or they're really romantically heavy language. And I think there's a good book I read about a year or so ago, and I actually made a YouTube about it and how it affects worship. But yeah, in general, like because of cultural things and changes, like the church at large, one could say it generally has moved in a way that it expresses itself more femininely. Feminine. The way it expresses itself is more feminine, and that's because when you look at churches, a lot of churches, often there are more women in the church than there are men, because it's like it's the chicken or the egg thing, because then a lot of guys don't want to come because they'd rather be doing what a lot of guys typically like to do on Sunday: watch football, go fishing, go hunting, or whatever. And sitting in church doesn't seem like the most manly thing to do. So I think that's kind of like that's a very not deeply researched assessment. I mean, someone else did the research. That's kind of very brief summary of the state we're in. But the fact that, I mean, if there's women see the world differently than men and vice versa, and I think we can also relate to God differently. And if you have women writing worship songs, a lot of them, maybe they are using language that makes more sense to women than it does for guys. I think there are biblical references of relating to God in a way that, I mean, okay, you think about that. The church is Christ's bride, right? Like, there's definitely masculine and feminine references within Scripture in referring to the way we relate to God. I personally don't like to do too many of the songs. Maybe once in a while we'll have one of those songs. I'm trying to think of one that I always think of some of the Bethel songs have pretty feminine in their writing. The song "Pieces," that's the one's coming to mind right now. What are your thoughts, Spencer? I'm kind of just rambling on this.
Do you know the song "The More I Seek You" by Carrie Job? It's an old one.
Yeah.
Older.
Yep.
We do that one in my church, but I find that one particularly feminine because the chorus is, "I want to sit at your feet, drink from the cup in your hands, lean back against you and breathe, feel your heartbeat." To me, that sounds like something Carrie Job would say, and it doesn't sound like something that Spencer Cormany would say.
Yeah.
But I think that in that there's almost like a stretching that's good, because I probably wouldn't say that to God, but I think it's valuable language to express. I don't express my thoughts that way, but to have those words available to me to sing, to me, is beneficial, because I think it just deepens my relationship with God. So I think as long as it's theologically accurate, I think that there is some value to it for men to sing that kind of language if you're the kind of guy who isn't particularly emotional in that way.
Yeah, great thoughts on that. Next question from the comments comes from Jay. Hey, Jake, are you still using Audio Fusion systems for your in-ear monitors? Yes, I am. I use it every single Sunday. And generally, for the most part, it's just me using it. And there's a couple factors that come into play. We're a church plant, so everything is super rushed getting set up on a Sunday morning. And the times we've tried to get other vocalists on, and not every time, but the one at the time we tried to get our other vocalists on, she got the app open, she got it plugged in, but she didn't turn on location services on her phone, and I didn't really figure this out till later. So she was having a lot of dropout issues with the Wi-Fi. So mine was working fine, hers didn't, and we're just I'll just go back to our other wireless system for her. But there was for our Christmas Eve service, my wife and I sang together, and she used it in a work rate on her phone. The key is you have to have a high bandwidth Wi-Fi router, and you have to turn off. You put your phone in airplane mode and then turn off location services as well, because these devices are trying to send data to Apple every single second, and you want to get rid of that for it to be clear. But I like it a lot. It's been working great. I use it week in and week out. Even for worship leaders who are just maybe you just want one wireless system, it's still less expensive to buy a $300 Wi-Fi router and one license for Soundcaster and the Performer app, assuming you already have one of these smartphones, an iPhone, to work with it. So yes, I've been using it. It's working great. And then another reason why we haven't gotten more people on it, our band just isn't that huge. We usually have just four people on a Sunday, and then we have our vocalists will show up, and they're wearing because they're female vocalist wearing a dress or something like that. It doesn't have pockets. I don't know if you got. I realized this. It's I was with my wife Kaylee the other day. She always leaves her phone places. I'm like, why don't you put your phone in your pocket? And it's oh, most women clothing just doesn't have pockets. So it's kind of makes it difficult for them to have the phone handy, or to use it for in-ears if they can't secure it on themselves. They rather use a wireless pack that can clip on their clothing. So those are my thoughts on that.
Next question is from no particular person. They asked, recently I bought an acoustic guitar. What are some beginner worship songs that you recommend? Any easy worship songs to start playing, Jake?
I would say anything in the key of G. That's always my first key. I point people in if you're starting to play acoustic guitar. I'm trying to think, because I feel like the key of C, the F can be kind of a tricky chord. If you can do G, I think you're going to be doing well. There's lots of worship songs in that key. I'm not going to name any of them particularly right now, unless if you have some ideas, Spencer.
I mean, I think How Great Is Our God is a great place to start. That's super
Yep.
simple.
Yep.
How He Loves is the same four chords over and over again. It's in a different time signature, but maybe that's a good second song to throw in there. Yeah, I mean, worship songs in general are pretty simple. So if you pick one of the top ones, I don't think that they'll be too difficult to sit down and figure out.
The next question comes from uh, Christian here. Okay, so I am a worship leader leading alone at a small church right now and trying to build a team. We are doing a complete relaunch, and I've been given a very small budget, but I want in-ears and an X32. Well, I think if you could get the X32 rack mountable mixer, and then I think that's like less than $1,000. Maybe get a used one for maybe $700 or $800, and then find a used iPad. It doesn't have to be a brand new iPad. It's just going to run the X32 mixing app. That's going to be, I think you can get a used iPad these days for like a couple $100. And then for in-ear monitoring, I would consider just getting the Behringer, the P2 in-ear monitor units, or the P1. Depends if you want mono or stereo. But what you'll do is put the X32 rack on the stage with the band. So your whole mixer actually is going to be on stage with you. But for whoever's running sound, they can use an iPad, the used iPad I was talking about, with the app that controls the mix, so they can control it from out in the crowd or in the congregation. And then it's just going to cut down on expense that way, because you could, instead of getting number one, you don't have to get a full-size board with all the hardware and stuff, because you're just paying for hardware. You're not really paying for extra features that way. And then you could save on not having to buy a digital snake, and you'll have that X32 on stage functioning like a digital snake or stage box would, and all your inputs go into that, and then you'll have plenty of outputs for all your in-ear mixes. So that would be my low-budget recommendation for an X32 with in-ear ecosystem.
All right, Taylor asks, how do you handle new worship team members / the audition process at your church? And I'll give some insight into that. I think we've talked about this a couple of times. This seems like a common question, so definitely go back and look at the past couple live Q&As we've done, because I'm pretty sure we talked about it in there. But essentially, let's talk about the audition process first. At my church, I lead in a small church, so we don't necessarily have auditions, because I find that, like, I'm trying to get additional people on my team and I want them to be good, but I feel like for now in my church that word audition might scare too many people away. I definitely think it's beneficial whenever you get to a certain point, but for now I just invite people to come to our rehearsal. So we have 5 people on the team. If somebody else joins rehearsal, it's not going to be a problem for them to be there. And then from there, I'll have them sit beside me if they're a vocalist or play guitar or whatever, and just tell them, I want you to play along with us. And I'll give them the songs in advance so they're prepared. And I'll just listen to them while we're all playing in the same context. That way they're not intimidated, like I have to sit in front of this guy and play or sing all by myself. They're in the context of the whole band. So if I think that they can fit on the team, then I start to ask them to come to more rehearsals. And what I want to see there is consistency. So I want to see that they'll put in the effort and come consistently to worship rehearsals before they ever lead on Sunday mornings. And then from there, once they show that they're consistent, and hopefully that whole process of them coming to rehearsals for a long enough time assimilates them into the team, and they start to catch the vision and the values that we want, then I will have them lead on Sunday mornings.
Another question from the email was from Mitch, and he had kind of a longer question about improving Ableton Live's performance, because he's running into this issue where he has quite a few tracks in his session. Sounds like he's building sessions similar to the way I do. At least I do them in arrangement view, and he has up to like 74 tracks going, and he's still hearing like dropouts in the audio. And he's running a MacBook Pro i5 processor with 16 gigs of RAM, a solid state drive. Sounds like he's got good specs. So wherever I run into a problem with Ableton Performance, it's usually with how fast is it able to read audio from the hard drive. So obviously, if you have the session stored on your local hard drive and it's solid state, you shouldn't have any issues. Like, you should be able to boot up Ableton, boot up the project, take a couple seconds for it to read those audio files and make them ready for playback, and then you're ready to go. Or if you use an external drive, make sure you use an external little solid state drive. Again, that will improve the read speeds for your computer and reading the hard drive. So other than that, Mitch, I'm running at least that many tracks, maybe more, in my arrangement view sessions. Maybe it's not running them simultaneously, so I don't know exactly how you're setting all this stuff up. But my computer really never has any of those issues. Like, I load it up, takes about 20 seconds for it to make sure it pulls up all the audio files in that project, but then it's good to go. But hopefully something in there that I just said will help you out in this situation.
All right, Sang Kong asks, how many hours do you spend on worship planning / practice, etc.? How much time per section per week? Is it possible for a part-timer? So I'm full-time at my church. Jake, are you technically part-time?
Yeah, I'm part-time.
Yeah. So it's possible, clearly, because you do it at your church, right?
Yep.
So how many hours do you think you spend preparing to lead worship?
If you give me 2 solid, uninterrupted hours during the weekdays to pick songs out, to prep tracks, in Ableton, all the cues, prep slides. Sometimes it depends. Like, how we're doing a new song, that might take me an extra 15 minutes to prep what goes into that. But I'd say 2 hours of focused work, maybe another half hour to an hour of touching base with the pastor or any other band members, meeting and stuff like that. Then we show up to church on Sunday. We set up from basically 7 o'clock, and then we rehearse, and services at 10, so that's 3 hours. And then we do service and tear down. That's about 5 hours on Sunday is our role. So all in all, I don't think I ever spend more than 10 hours a week for everything I do. Maybe most time it's actually closer to 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah, and then I'm full-time, and it gets a little bit tricky because I feel like a lot of my responsibilities kind of mix together. So I'd say I spend probably 20 hours preparing for worship, for a Sunday, and plus I lead on Wednesdays and rehearsals and stuff like that. But a lot of that I do in that 20 hours might not necessarily be things that you do if you were just part-time. So it's definitely possible if you're a part-timer, but it'll look a little bit different than what I do, because I'm pastoring the teams, and I'm also technically the media person at my church. So videos, announcement slides, all of that stuff, I'm getting that ready too, and I kind of just lump that into one. So I probably spend about 20 hours doing that stuff.
Yeah, and I want to say too that when I say I just put a couple hours a week in, a lot of it's due to the fact that I spend more time, especially getting the church up and running the first few months, building out my song library in Planning Center, and building my Ableton sessions the right way. If you put more time up front and just kind of work smart and hard, then you're going to save so much time down the road. And the other thing too is I'm just trying to get better recently about, especially because I'm doing a lot for church front, is these little devices here take away so much of your productivity and focus. So I deleted most of the apps on that phone and try to ignore it as much as possible, just so I can focus on what I actually should be doing. But yeah, that it is possible to be very part-time as a worship leader and still accomplish quite a bit. There's another question I saw here in the comments, because we're going to wrap things up here pretty soon, coming up on 15 minutes. Let's see here. I apologize. I totally lost the one I was looking at. So if you have any questions you'd like to do right now, Spencer, you can go ahead.
How do you start the process of removing music stands from the stage? What's the best way to communicate the change to your team / band? So I'll answer first, Jake, and
Yep.
then I'll let you go. I was lucky enough to be on a team where that was already the expectation. That was the expectation from the beginning. So I didn't really have to do any any of that work in my current church, but at previous places, whenever I've tried to implement that change, you've just got to show people what the vision is. Like this is what the effects of this are going to be, and this is why it's going to be good. So you'll be able to engage with the congregation more. You won't be locked down to like whenever you have your music stand, a lot of times we're just focused on that, and it's not really freeing us up to worship because we're focused on what the next chord is instead of already knowing what it is and just playing it automatically. So explaining things like that helps. And then I think also just not springing it on people. Like, don't say the Sunday before, hey, I want you to not play without music this Sunday. Work them into it slowly. So it starts at rehearsal and say, for this song, we're all not going to use music, just at rehearsal, and see how it goes, and slowly amp it up over time until you're able to do it on Sundays.
Yeah, and my only other thought is you could also kind of wean them off of it, in that maybe, you give them just the planning center sheet that has the song keys that you're in, and then get them something like the Chord Wheel, which is that cool little book that will show you, okay, if you're in the key of C, here's all the conceivable chords in this key. If you're in the key of D, here's all the chords in this key. And that'll kind of wean them from having to, like, always see the chords over lyrics and start to develop even an ear for these things. So, yeah, that's I definitely think it's not easy to transition people if they've been stuck in a music stand all their life, but ask them how they would like it if they showed up to a concert for one of their favorite bands and they were all like staring at music stands the whole time. It just would make a huge impact on the whole vibe and feel of it. So I think we have time for one more question. I'll let you have a pick, Spencer.
Okay. Let's do a quick one. Any good YouTube channels for improving vocal technique?
Yes. There's one. I have not met her yet, but I think it's called, I'll double check here.
Is it the Worship Vocalist?
Yep.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the Worship Vocalist. She's got a lot of great stuff. She's got a YouTube channel, and then there's lots of tutorial videos and just like theory videos, like the role of a background vocalist, when to sing harmony on a worship team. She's really crushing it there with lots of great stuff. Reminds me, I need to like send these over to my vocalist. I'd love to collaborate with her sometime. But she's also got a site as well, and I know she does like one-on-one coaching. So you may want to check that out. Do you have any other ideas, Spencer?
No, that's what I was going to say.
Worship Online as well. I know they have a lot of YouTube videos, and they'll put some of their vocal videos on there too. But that would be my recommendation. Let's see. Oh, I just want to answer a comment, but it's not a concert. Most of the congregation is looking at the lyrics on the wall, not the musician. I think it's a valid observation, but at the same time, I just feel like people are actually looking at the musicians and the people on stage leading worship and taking cues, like from how engaged are they, how engaged am I going to be. I think you're right, and sometimes it depends, like where you put your lyrics and stuff like that. I get where your comment's coming from, but I just don't really. I don't know. I always feel like the "but it's not a concert" thing is a excuse to just not try hard and push ourselves, to give our best, because I think it's more important than a concert. We're like worshiping God, and we do want to give our best and be as excellent as we can. So. With that said, though, I appreciate your insight, Bradley, and for all you guys for being here on the live stream and asking questions. It's really just great to hear from you guys, get to know you more and what you're dealing with in your ministry. Spencer, where can folks go to get in touch with you and learn more from you?
You can follow me over on Instagram at Leading Worship Well. I post there every single day. I post practical worship leading tips, and you can follow me at my website leadingworshipwell.com. I'm also on Facebook, but Instagram is mostly where I hang out, so that's where you can find me. I'd love to meet you and for you to be a part of that community.
And don't forget to smash like on this video, guys. There's 42 of you on here right now, so there should be 42 likes on this video. And subscribe to the Churchfront YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any of our live streams or the latest content that we are producing to help you grow yourself and to grow your worship ministry. I want to invite you to check out worshipleaderschool.com. That's my biggest project I've been working on so far with Churchfront. It's a membership site for worship leaders. You're going to find an online course library as well as a community. We saw some of those members here. Taylor was on the stream earlier, and as well as the office hours I'm hosting. And I'm 3 minutes late for an office hour session right now. I got to go hop on and hang out with one of the students. So go to worshipleaderschool.com to learn more. And with that said, just have a great rest of your day, guys, and thank you so much for being here, and keep up the great work in your ministry.